All right, guys, let's talk about double closing. There's two ways to get a wholesale deal done. There's the assignment, which 90% of your deals will be an assignment. And then there's a double close, right? So what is a double close? A double close is when you close on the property and then you turn around same day simultaneously and you sell that property to your buyer. When I say your buyer, it's the same buyer. Everything we talked about up until this point is the exact same. You're just not doing an assignment contract. You're doing a double closing. So your buyer is still your buyer. For example, you got the property on the contract for $100,000. Your buyer's going to buy it from you for 110. Instead of doing an assignment for 10 grand, you're just going to do a double closing. You're going to close and then your buyer's going to close. So let's go dig a little deeper. There are two transactions happening the same day. When you buy it from the seller, that's transaction A to B. When your buyer buys it from you, that's transaction B to C. So you're literally closing and then selling. That's why it's called a double close, because there's two closings happening, right? Now you may think, I don't have the money for that, right? $100,000, I can't get the financing, any of that, right? There's a ton of transactional lenders out there that provide transactional funding for double closings, because this situation does come up a lot, especially if you're in certain states that don't allow assignments, right? You're going to have to double close. We'll talk about that on the next point. But it's funding that will provide the funds for the transaction for a small fee, excluding closing costs. All they do is they take a small fee. Let's say $750, maybe $1,000. I've seen 1%. I've seen all over the place. But they take a small fee to provide that $100,000 for you, right? They're going to bring all the money to the table, excluding closing costs. They're just going to take a small fee out of your funds, right? Just for providing their money. And I even put down here, I can provide the transactional funding for you. I have multiple lenders that I use. Literally, I can provide it for you. It's not a big deal. I know the term transactional lender may sound, overwhelming or whatever. What is that? It's literally somebody that puts up the money for you for a small fee to get a double closing done. All right. So situations where you need to consider double closing. States that don't allow assignments. As of right now, apparently Illinois and Oklahoma do not allow assignments, or they have like one assignment rule, or you have to be a licensed realtor to assign, all that stuff. We're not licensed, guys. We're not licensed realtors. We are just wholesalers, right? So you can double close in those states, but you can't assign in those states. Literally, it's the same. Everything's the same. Again, up until this point, we're just going to do a double close. No problem. Right? Now, the biggest, difference between these two funds-wise is if you double close, you're doing two closings. So you have to cover the closing costs twice. So let's say closing costs on the first transaction is $1,000. Closing costs on the second transaction is $1,000. That's $2,000. So you have to have enough margin built into that deal to cover that $2,000. So if I have a 10 grand margin, great, right? That 2,000 comes out of my 10 grand margin for the closing costs. And then that transactional lender is going to take his little fee out of my margin. Let's say that's another $1,000. So that's $3,000, right? But I'm still walking away with $7,000 to get the deal done. Totally fine. So states that don't allow assignments, don't let that scare you. It's literally, we're just going to double close. Another situation is when you have a very large assignment. We already talked about, so on this assignment contract, your buyer can see your assignment, right? A legit buyer won't care about that. But if you have a $50,000 assignment, you might want to double close, unless you got a buyer that you absolutely have done multiple deals with, you trust, they don't care. But if you want to keep your assignment contracts, your assignment fee secret, consider double closing, because they can't see how much you make when you double close. All they see is their transaction, right? Transaction B to C. All they see is they're buying it from you for X, right? So our example earlier was we are buying it from the seller for 100 grand. Let's say we were able to get a buyer at 150. All that buyer sees on their transaction B to C contract is 150,000. They don't see our transaction A to B contract for 100 grand. So they don't know how much we're making. Simple, right? All right. When there's a realtor involved, this is the last scenario. When there's a realtor involved, they may not be familiar with assignments, right? Or they may not want to go that route. This happens a lot if you list deals on MLS, or if you come into, contact with a seller who only wants to use a realtor. Fine, we can double close. It's just another tool in the toolbox, guys. That's all it is. Again, most of them will be assignments, but this is a way that you can do another transaction from these scenarios. All right, last one. This was a question I got from somebody, and I thought it was a great question, so I wanted to add it in here. What happens if you close and then your buyer doesn't close? So like we said earlier, transaction A to B. What happens if we do that? We get the transactional lender to fund it and everything, and it's recorded, and then your buyer doesn't send the money for transaction B to C. Are you left high and dry with the property? No, because every attorney and every title company knows that we don't record or anything until transaction B to C sends in their funds. Your buyer has to send in their money first before any of this other stuff goes down, before recording, before any of that stuff goes down. And your attorney will know this. Your title company will know this. We don't record any of this stuff until we get the funds from the final buyer. In this way, they prevent any of that from happening. You won't be left high and dry with the property, any of that stuff. Your buyer has to present the money first. So that's it, guys. This, again, you won't do it a lot. There are situations where you will have to double close. And if you need more help, obviously our community is there to help you. It's not a big deal. So I just wanted to make sure I covered it. So now you know assignments and double close, guys. I'll see you in the next chapter.